Spivot was a boy born into a family in the eastern United States, although he only lived out on the vast, endless prairies with very simple facilities. Despite that, he was a genius in science. He loved studying how engines worked and often took his mother's tools to tinker and explore. In contrast to Spivot, his younger brother Leon preferred physical activities. Leon often went with their father to learn horseback riding, shooting, or play dangerous games. One day, Spivot let Leon play with a gun. He wanted to figure out how the weapon worked so he could build one himself and give it to his brother. Unfortunately, the gun went off. Spivot hurried to tell his father, but it was too late. From then on, the family lived in endless sorrow. Although no one ever blamed him with words, Spivot always believed that his brother's death was his fault. Every day, he lived haunted by guilt. Life at school wasn't any better. None of his test answers was well graded. His teacher said they were nonsense and not in the textbooks. Hearing that, Spivot pulled out proof from a magazine and argued back, but the teacher mocked him in front of the class, even making fun of him for wearing mismatched socks. To insist on competing with an 8-year-old student was truly disgraceful. Still, not everyone turned away from Spivot. By chance, he once listened to a lecture from a doctor about the great steam engine. The boy felt like he had found the truth of his life, so he studied diligently day and night. In the end, he proudly brought his work to show his father, but the man just muttered vaguely and went back to watching TV. Disappointed, Spivot went to his mother's room, but she was too absorbed in studying beetles to care. Not giving up, the next day Spivot went to see the professor again. With his encouragement, the boy decided to send his invention to a research institute in Washington. To his great surprise, he was informed that he had won first prize in the competition. They wanted him to give a speech at the award ceremony. Afraid they might cancel the award if they found out he was just a child, Spivot quickly put the phone down on the floor and pretended it was the sound of his father's footsteps. Then he claimed his father was mute and needed someone else to speak on his behalf. Winning the big prize made Spivot very happy, but saying it out loud at home didn't matter. No one cared. So, he made a bold decision. He would go to Washington himself to receive the award. Right after, he packed his luggage and got ready to leave. Before going, he entered his late brother's room to say goodbye. Then he wrote a letter to the family and even slipped his mother's diary into his bag, so he could read it when he felt sad. Since the train station was far away, Spivot left home very early. But just as he stepped out of the house, his father appeared. Yet the man just drove away without even noticing his son. Strange, but typical. Spivot trudged along alone, dragging his luggage to the station. When he saw the train approaching, the signal light still hadn't turned red. Quick-witted, he climbed up and used a pen to color it red. Sure enough, the train stopped. But just as he was loading his luggage, 2 railway workers spotted him and tried to chase him off. However, the successful always find their own way. Spivot cleverly climbed onto a cargo conveyor belt. Not only did he shake off the guards, but he also managed to get onto the train just in time. And so, the 8-year-old boy, carrying an oversized suitcase, set off all by himself to Washington. It was the first time he had ever left home, and he was filled with excitement. Humming to himself, Spivot strolled along, enjoying the picturesque scenery. When boredom struck, he practiced a few martial arts moves to stretch his muscles. But his smile quickly faded at the next stop when he saw 2 security guards carefully inspecting the train. It turned out they had been informed that someone was hitching a ride without buying a ticket. Realizing the danger, Spivot hurriedly grabbed his luggage and hid inside a cart on the train. Soon after, a balding man came to check. Unable to open the door, he never would have guessed that Spivot was inside, pretending to be a dummy. But something seemed off about this dummy. Why was there snot dripping from its nose? Luckily, just then the train started moving again. The man didn't think too much of it and let it go. Thanks to his quick wits, Spivot had narrowly escaped once more. That night, he slept soundly. But the next day, he felt terribly bored. After all, Spivot was only an 8-year-old boy, and missing home was completely natural. Before long, the train reached the Midwest. Hungry, he looked for something to eat, but he had no money. An old man mistook Spivot for a beggar and gave him a few coins. Just when he thought he could finally fill his stomach, 2 policemen arrived carrying a missing child flyer with his photo on it. Luckily, Spivot ran fast enough to escape, otherwise, he would have been dragged away in chains. So the boy wandered alone through the streets. Passing a phone booth, Spivot thought about calling home. In his mind, he imagined everyone eagerly fighting to talk to him, promising to grant any request if only he would return. But in reality, he hadn't called at all. He was too afraid of being disappointed. Instead, he pressed on with his journey. That night, the train passed through a small town. Naively, Spivot imagined that somewhere in this town, another boy might also be dreaming of taking a trip like his. He told himself he was lucky, but deep down, he felt sad. The truth was, Spivot was just a lonely child, running away from home, and no one even noticed. While missing home, he pulled out his mother's diary. Only then did he realize she hadn't been as indifferent as he thought. Since the day Leon died, she had kept the habit of going to his room each morning to call him for school, only to remember at the door that her son was gone. Each time she saw Spivot alone, she felt great sorrow. Perhaps she was still trapped in the pain of losing her youngest child, unable to express her feelings in any other way, so she poured them into the diary. Every day, she had still been watching over Spivot, caring for him silently, even if she couldn't show it openly. Soon, the train reached its final station. Spivot quickly hid his luggage and looked for a way to slip out of the station. Unfortunately, a policeman spotted him. Why are there so many bald people in America? Spivot wondered. The officer insisted on taking him to the station. Of course, Spivot refused and bolted, running for his life. The two of them chased each other to a floodgate, where the door happened to be split in two. The policeman was delighted, thinking this was a dead end. Who could have guessed Spivot would grin crookedly, leap straight across to the other side, and, thanks to a director's mercy, escape with only a scratch on his arm. And so, the boy wandered alone once more through the vast city, lost and unsure of where to go. Then, a truck driver offered him a ride. The man proudly showed Spivot pictures he had taken with previous passengers, even flashing one of himself before shooting an enemy. Oh no, Spivot thought, is this man a kidnapper fattening me up with milk before ransom? Luckily, that wasn't the case. The driver was simply a former soldier. Before long, the kind man dropped Spivot at the gates of the institute. But when the manager saw he was just an 8-year-old boy, she didn't believe him and turned away. Unexpectedly, when Spivot explained in detail how he had built his machine, she spun right back around, joyfully hugging him as if he were her own child. She immediately took him to the hospital for a checkup. Fortunately, it was only a minor injury, so he could still go on with his speech. To be sure, they scanned his brain, and the results left everyone astounded. His mind was beyond even the level of a genius. Soon, the big event arrived. At the ceremony, Spivot's invention had been turned into a full model, displayed proudly at the center of the hall. Even Annie, who was hard to impress, was stunned that a mere 8-year-old could create something so groundbreaking it might go down in history. The elites in attendance all smiled warmly and congratulated Spivot. But with just a glance and a few simple observations of their facial expressions, he could tell their kindness was fake. Finally, it was his turn to speak. Everyone waited, expecting Spivot to reveal the secrets of creating a perpetual motion engine. But instead, he said, there are 3 things I want to say. First, he thanked everyone for not dismissing him just because he was a child and for allowing him to stand here and speak. Second, he revealed that his engine could only run for 400 years, meaning the road to true perpetuity was still very far away. Hearing this, the manager frowned with disappointment. Then came the third point. Spivot suddenly froze, silent. The director of the institute grew impatient and urged him to continue. Spivot hesitated, then said softly, "My younger brother has passed away." Everyone was puzzled. Why would he bring up such a sad story on such an important day? But what they didn't know was that Spivot had traveled thousands of miles just to express what weighed on his heart. For years, he had lived under a burden of guilt, and this was the only way he could hope for people to understand him, not judge him wrongly. Spivot explained that he had always loved science, and so he let his brother play with a gun in hopes of discovering its mechanism, so he could build one himself as a gift. But the gun malfunctioned, and his brother died. His story moved the entire hall. The audience stood and applauded, filled with sympathy and admiration. And among them, quietly seated without anyone noticing when she had arrived, was Spivot's mother, who had heard every word. She never imagined that all these years her son had been carrying such deep pain. From that moment on, Spivot's name spread like wildfire. The manager took advantage of his fame, cashing in through commercial deals, photo shoots for international magazines, and even arranging a visit to the White House. Everyone was exploiting the boy for profit. No one cared how he actually felt. Lonely and searching for comfort, Spivot tried calling his parents, but no one answered. And so, he continued letting others take advantage of him. This time, he was to appear on a popular talk show with a huge audience. The manager warned him that the host would press him about Leon's death, so he should only say it was an accident, never admit fault. Sure enough, on air, the host kept digging into his brother's death, clearly trying to sensationalize the tragedy to boost ratings. But Spivot didn't utter a single word. Then suddenly, his mother appeared. This time, the situation was truly awkward because earlier Spivet had lied, claiming he was an orphan. He realized his mistake. Yet, his mother showed no anger. She gently told him that, yes, it had been wrong to let Leon play with the gun, but in truth, no one was at fault. She had never blamed him for what happened. Her words untied the knot of guilt that had been strangling Spivet's heart for so long. He burst into tears and leapt into his mother's arms. Ignoring the cameras and the show, mother and son walked away together. The manager tried to stop them, only to receive a well-deserved slap that shattered her makeup. The smug host also got a fist from Spivet's father, sending him straight to the emergency room. At last, the three of them returned home, reunited in happiness. Spivet finally asked why, on the day he left, his father hadn't stopped him. The truth was simple: his father had been too busy rummaging in the car and hadn't seen him at all. Thanks to this journey, the family was able to overcome the pain of the past, and the parents even took the chance to give Spivet a new sibling, though hopefully this time, Spivet wouldn't hand his baby brother a gun to test again. And with that,